So Circle K and who we are. We are a global operator of convenience stores and fuel retailing locations. So we've got over 10,000 locations in North America. We've also got thousands of locations in Europe and Asia as well. You can see we've closed our operations in Russia, of course, with everything going on there. That was a recent change. But we do have a lot of operations in Scandinavia, and then also a few thousand locations in Asia as well. We've grown by acquisition over time, so it's actually a pretty cool story. We started by 5 guys in Quebec back in the 80s. They started with one convenience store, and they built it up over time and just kept buying retail locations all over the globe, really. So that's where the Circle K acquisition came from about 10 years ago. And then in Europe, which I'm going to talk a lot about right now, we acquired Statoil Fuel Retail back in 2012, and that's where the bulk of the European operations came from. So we've learned a lot from what's going on in Europe, and being a little bit further ahead of the U.S. With EV transition, we've been able to take a lot of what is happening there and trying to bring it here to the U.S. now. So globally, we're mentioned a convenience operator. And so EV charging is something that in some ways it's a little bit different for our business, since we've been operating gasoline and diesel fueling locations for over 30 years. But in other ways, it's really part and parcel with what we do on a day-to-day basis, which is to provide products and services to people on the go and really give people what they want. So we're moving with the market, and we're really responding to consumer desire to provide new types of fuel here as we go through this transition. So I mentioned Norway and Statoil Fuel Retail, the brand that we acquired there about 10 years ago. And Norway's been in the news a lot with EVs. I think you all have probably heard of the progress that they've made there. And so this last year we saw almost 90% of new car sales being electric or plug-in hybrid over the course of 2021. So that was a huge shift in the market, really just in the last 10 years. They started with their policies in 2010, 2012 timeframe, and the market has shifted extremely quickly. So you can see right now, total plug-ins close to 90%. And this has gone from the early days here, when really it was just the Tesla and a few other cars like these city cars here. Has gone from 10% share up to close to 90%. It started with a huge push on the policy side, and it's really expanded from the policy side to that consumer-driven market pull. And so what's interesting here is that there's a lot of things that aren't applicable between Norway and the U.S. We're a huge country compared to Norway. They're relatively small, 5 million people or so. Just one large city with Oslo, and the outlying areas are relatively rural. But I think there's a lot that we can learn, namely when we see this transition start to take off, it starts to really move very quickly. And the tipping point here in the last couple of years has really been the introduction of these mass market cars with longer ranges and more affordable pricing. So we see it going from this policy push to a market pull, and I think something similar is really happening in the U.S. and Canada right now, where there are some strong policy levers that have been pulled over the past few years with the tax credit and the ZEV standards in the western states in the Northeast. But we're now seeing that expand from those policy-driven markets into really consumer-driven markets. And once we get through some of these supply chain issues, I think that will really start to pick up. A lot of these cars you can't even get, like the Mach-E. It's sold out in the U.S. for the next year and a half, basically. The same thing with the VW ID4, which is the car that I drive. But there's a lot of manufacturing capacity coming online in the U.S. with the VW plant in Chattanooga, as well as the Ford plants in Kentucky, and all of these manufacturing facilities coming online. We expect to see supply really start to pick up here in the next couple of years. So I mentioned we've taken a lot of our operations there and learned from them, and we're bringing that to North America now. So here's just a quick snippet of what we've done in Norway. I was over there a couple of weeks ago and taking notes, and it's pretty impressive to see the progress there, and trying to learn from that and bring it here to North America. So here's just some cool things that we've done in Norway. This was the first fuel station in the world where we replaced gas pumps and put in EV charging chargers. So these are 150 kW units underneath the canopy. This is kind of a shot across the bow a little bit. I think some fuel retailers are a little bit worried to see this kind of thing happening. But for us, like I said, we're embracing this consumer transition, and we want to provide people what they want in terms of fuel and also the in-store experience as well. So it was a little bit, technically, it's not really that difficult to do. Fuel pumps, there's already power in these locations. We just have to get more power there, and we have to just adjust some of the small mounting brackets and things like that. But overall, it's really not that difficult. It's more of a commercial decision. And when you start to see fuel volumes decline, which is what we are seeing in Norway, when you get to those levels of market adoption, then that's where you start to look at replacing pumps with chargers. Another thing we're doing in Europe, we're a home charging provider. We provide hardware and also sell electricity in markets where that's allowed. A lot of the markets in Europe are deregulated, so we are an electricity retailer as well. So this goes along with providing consumers what they want in terms of fueling, and then also providing a total solution in terms of that home charging and away from home charging. And as a fuel retailer, that's something that's pretty challenging. So we're going from an environment right now, everybody has to come to us to get their fuel, right? Gas stations are on pretty much every corner in the US, and if you want gas, you have to go to a gas station. Now you can fuel at home, and that takes takes away a large chunk potentially of our business. And so we're looking to respond to that by providing other types of charging, including home charging. We haven't launched that in North America, but it's something we're looking at. And it's something that another one of those things that we've been doing in Europe and are looking to take those learnings elsewhere outside of the European footprint. We also had the first EV truck charging location here in Oslo. This is another site that I visited a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty cool. So this is the interesting thing about this installation is that it's not, you can see these chargers these are just regular light duty vehicle chargers. These are again 150 kW DC fast chargers. It was not intended to be a heavy duty site, but because of how much market transformation is going on there, these trucks just started showing up and charging at our chargers. So it was a little bit of a surprise, but we were able to accommodate it. And we actually, when we were at this site a couple of weeks ago, there was one of these dump trucks was there, and the driver, we got to talk to the driver for a while. He was really happy. He said his wife thought that he had a new girlfriend because he was so happy when he came home from work, which I did. Like her, wondering if he gets paid to say these things, but it really was just off the cuff interaction. So pretty cool to see the heavy duty space start to evolve, and I think some folks are talking about that later today as well, so they'll have more information about that. But that's just another example of something that we're seeing happening in the market, and we're starting to take that into account when we design our sites. We have to think about the vehicles that are going electric now. It's not just the light duty vehicles, it's medium and heavy duty, and that takes some adaptation on our sites as well. We also had, this is another store that we built back in 2019, 2020. It was awarded as the most important store in the convenience store industry in 2020. And you can see here, very large charging area, a dedicated part of the lot here. So this was a new site. It's a fairly large site. We also visited this a couple of weeks ago, but you can see the new store here. The fuel island is here. It's relatively small compared to what you'll see for a lot of our developments here. But the interesting thing is really this dedicated portion here. You've got about 20 of our Circle K chargers, and then you've got a much larger 32 stall installation from Tesla here. We've got the power cabinets here on the side. These are all pull-through slots. So when I was talking about the medium and heavy duty adoption, that's one thing that we've incorporated are these pull-through slots, and then you can also things like pickup trucks and the other vehicles that pull trailers are starting to use our chargers a lot as well. So this is a configuration that you're starting to see in Europe a lot, and you'll probably start to see it in the US as well. And another shot of down below there. It's a pretty nice country, actually. If you guys have a chance to visit, I'd recommend it. It's pretty scenic. So this is just our last sort of flagship store that I wanted to touch on here on Burke-Borton. It's another flagship site in that we put the fuel chargers up front. So the chargers are in the front part of the forecourt, and then the fuel pumps are in the back part here. We also have solar on top of the canopy here. So you can see we've got 6 300 kW chargers, a nice solar array here on both of the canopies. And then over on this side here, we have a battery storage installation as well to test out the role of that on our sites. Yeah.
So I'm curious, because you're showing these images of these, what look like conventional gas stations, but they're not. So for the rates, the electric rates, are they variable? Do they change? Do you have it posted, or is it on an app? How do you
For the rates that the customer pays?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're posted on the app. So we have a Circle K Charge app, and they're not variable at this point. It's a flat volumetric rate. It's just kroner cents per kilowatt hour. And they're posted on the app, and then they're also posted on the display here, so the customer can see what they're going to pay when they come up to the pump, so to speak. And they know, looking at the app, they know ahead of time as well. They don't vary a whole lot. We did have to, in Europe, we did have to raise prices this year. Electricity prices were up quite a bit, and there's with the deregulated markets, there's a little bit faster feedback from the wholesale prices through to the retail prices that we're charging to the customers. But we still, it's not varying as fast as gasoline does. You know, like when you can go out.
Like intraday, for example, for higher demand periods, it's still the same price.
Not right now. Yeah, it's still flat. Yeah. So we are seeing that from some providers. They're doing some intraday experiments, I would say. I think Tesla has done some. They've done some pilots with not really time of use pricing, but they'll have free off-peak charging or very reduced off-peak charging because they're seeing some serious issues with queuing, especially around the holiday weekends. And so they're starting to experiment with that.
What about the installation? I think there was a few questions yesterday. And I don't know if Norway is on 50 or 60 hertz. You know, and I don't know if their grid's on 240 for residential, but maybe allude to the transformer and how was that sized up when you took your pictures? Did you get a glimpse of what they were installing? Did they?
Yeah, I actually have, hold that thought. Sure. I'll get there in just a second because I have a little comparison on that later. Yeah, this is just an aerial shot of that last station. So you can see the battery storage is here. The solar panels are here on the canopy. This is an interesting, so the entrance is here. So the cars come in here and the EV chargers are right at the front of the lot, which is a little bit of a change. Normally these would be gas pumps and we'd have the EV chargers like off here in the corner. You see that a lot in the US. You know, you put the chargers like way in the back so they're out of the way. But here at this flagship site, we put them up front. So it's very accessible. The EV drivers can come right in and know where the chargers are. We've only got 6 MPDs here at the back, which these are the gas pumps. The truck diesel is back here. And then the lot is pretty clean, I would say. Obviously, it was just built, so it's a pretty clean layout. You can see we're testing the use of the energy storage here, and then also the solar panels. This was really just a test installation. This is not something that we're doing at large scale in Europe yet, even, but we're looking at it and getting a lot of good data out of it. Excuse me. I would say the energy storage installation here, it still doesn't really pencil from an economic standpoint, even with the rates being a little bit higher in Europe. Just based on the upfront capex, it still doesn't really pencil for peak shaving. So we're still looking at that.
What's that?
That is a good question. I want to say it's like a 5 kW system, something in that range. So not massive, but not tiny either. Got
5 kW or 5 megawatt?
5 megawatt. Sorry. Yeah, we've got 6 300 kW chargers here, so I think it's a bit oversized to just to accommodate some future growth. So in terms of the market here in the US, and do we have any EV drivers here right now? Anybody already driving electric besides Jen? So if you're already driving electric, you're probably familiar with these names, but I broke it down just in terms of the fast charging market, what we're seeing for market development. So the very early adopters, Tesla obviously built out the largest network. They have the most chargers, the most drivers, the most charging sessions, but their network is closed. So not everybody can use it. Only Tesla drivers can use it. They have said that they're opening it up. I'll believe it when I see it. We know that they have a tendency to make announcements and deliver on them at some future time, which could be 20 years down the road. But hopefully we'll see that soon. EVgo is also an early market adopter. Of course, they started out as part of NRG, then they were spun off, then they were purchased, and they've been an early adopter in terms of the national network. But really over the last couple of years, it's been all about Electrify America. They've done the most stations. They built out a national network. You can get from coast to coast now, which you couldn't do in a non-Tesla EV a while ago. And they've done most of the work over the last couple of years. So I think now that we're seeing this new, I would say, third phase where other market operators are getting into it, we're seeing legacy businesses like Circle K, like 7-Eleven, like Shell, getting into the charging operating business. And this is really a step change in the market, along with the federal funding that's coming in. All of these retailers getting more interested in EV charging. We're going to see a lot more fast charging out there on highways and urban areas as well. That's the big change that we're seeing in the market right now. A lot of these sites, so these three entities, they don't own their own property for the most part. They're operating on other people's property. Whereas now, as we're going into the future, we're seeing entities like the fuel retailers start to really get more serious about it and install chargers at their own locations. So I think it's a big change because in the past, the entities that have been operating charging have been, for the most part, not super economically motivated. Tesla is trying to sell cars. The Electrify America funding is really coming from a settlement and from an obligation to spend that money. So they haven't been as economically focused either. But now operators like ourselves, like 7-Eleven, like Shell, they're going to be super economically focused. So they're putting CapEx in the ground and they want to see a return on that CapEx. So they're going to do things like right-sizing the installations, ensuring uptime, ensuring throughput, and operating it as a real business, for lack of a better term. All right, I mentioned we are now active in the space in North America. So we installed our first charger in Rock Hill, of all places, actually, not too far from our office in Charlotte, where I'm based. And it's the first of our 200 sites over the next 2 years. So fairly big announcement. We're not going to be the largest, but we are moving into this with some amount of speed and scale. And as I mentioned, taking what we learned from Europe and bringing it here to the US and to Canada. Yeah.
One more question, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine.
So the discussion about profitability is interesting. So have you all done any analysis on at what point, where do you think that it turns? Like, is there 10% of vehicles are electric? Is 10% where you guys start to see possibility for a return on investment, or is it a higher number? Or have you not even looked at it in that perspective? Maybe it's
we've definitely looked at it. I don't know if I can share too many details in that regard, but I would say that it's not far off for some markets. It's not very far off where we are now. So it just really depends on the market and how many cars. And I think the broad averages are a little bit misleading. A state like North Carolina, you have a pretty low average overall compared to somewhere like California. But then we also have pockets of very strong adoption, like Triangle area here, Charlotte, Western North Carolina. So it's possible to have good utilization in areas where on paper it might look not so great. Same thing with South Carolina. Like South Carolina as a state is pretty far behind when it comes to EV adoption, if you just look at the headline number. But you have I-95, I-85, you have cars coming down from New York going to Florida, and that's where a lot of the utilization can come from on transit corridors. So it's a little bit more difficult than just looking at the headline number. This site, it's a test site for us. We installed it close to our office so that we can test hardware and software configurations, and we don't have to fly to California where we're going to be installing some other sites. We've got kind of our standard layout here. You can see we're accommodating ADA accessibility, but even though it's not required right now under the federal guidelines, that's something that we're doing for future proofing and just general accessibility purposes. We have 2 chargers, 4 charging spots. This is a AEB Era 184 charger here, so 180 kW, and then we have a 120 kW charger as well. So we're testing some different hardware. Pretty happy with how it all came together. This was not part of the plan originally, to be honest, to do a site here. We have some other markets that we're concentrating on, but we wanted to get the site done, and we were happy to cut the ribbon on this a couple of weeks ago. In terms of the power requirements, so this was the question, gentleman there. Thanks for a good segue here. This was a 500 kVA transformer that we installed from Rock Hill Utilities. And that's a little bit oversized since most of our sites are going to be in the 350 kW connected load range, but we're planning for future growth, and that's something that you'll probably see in the industry across the board, is that people want more power than they're installing at first because they want to grow and make sure that power is available. So if we compare that to Bambla, which was the site that I showed earlier with the 32 Tesla sites and the 20 Circle K chargers, so it's a step change in power requirements. So going from 500 kVA at this site, requesting more on the order of 4,000, 5,000 kVA at these other sites. So quite a bit more power, and that's something that I would expect to see probably even higher than what they're asking for there in the future, just as we start to go from just light duty, as we start to electrify the heavy duty, the truck diesel, switch that over from diesel to truck EVs. I think we'll see even higher power requirements in the future.
So are y'all designing the sites like the one on the right for all the charging stations to be used simultaneously at the maximum output level of the charging station?
Not necessarily, but it is designed, and it depends a little bit on the local requirements, what threshold we have to hit. But we do have some good data on, if you have 10 300 kW chargers, what can be your expected peak load? And so that we are trying to size more to that expected peak load and then accommodating some future growth from there. So not necessarily on paper the total connected max load.
So if you have more than what you're expecting, do you throttle down so everybody can charge at a slower rate?
Depending on the site, yeah, we would do that. And depending on, goes back to the rate question a little bit as well. Like if we have a contract demand that we have to stay under, we would do some site level load management to make sure we don't hit that. Yeah.
Question, was there some sort of feasibility study done prior to building out the site and connecting, and what did that look like?
For Rock Hill or for
Either
region site?
Yeah, either.
We do. It is part of our process, so we want to do that pretty early on. The utility, figure out if there is capacity in the area. So we try to do that sort of desktop review pretty early in the process before we go through, because the design, the detailed design, the engineering, all of that is there's some cost to it. So we don't want to go through all that process and then go to the utility and they say, well, no, we only have a limited amount of capacity in the area. We can't serve that. We don't want that answer after all that work is done. So we do some feasibility up front. And that's actually another good segue here. So this is, I wanted to talk a little bit about working with utilities and what we see as some best practices across the country so far. So we do like to have a single point of contact for EV projects. That's very helpful. I know some utilities are larger than others and may not have the staffing capacity for that, but it's extremely helpful to have somebody who's worked on EV projects before, knows about some of these questions around peak load versus load management and how how EV chargers function. So that's something that we look for, that we recommend, that we appreciate. And the question about feasibility, that's something that we would work with. If there is an EV project manager or somebody who works on all these requests, it's nice to have that ability to do a quick desktop analysis and just say, what is the feeder capacity in the area? Can we add, say, 1,000 kVA here or there. If it's completely infeasible, we want to know that up front, or if it's going to cost $10 million to do the upgrade, we're not going to be installing at that location for sure. So it's better to know that sooner rather than later. Of course, everybody wants everything tomorrow or yesterday, and so the expedited timelines is helpful. I do have to give a shout out to Rock Hill Utilities. I don't think anybody's here from them today, but they were fantastic to work with. We got this site done in less than 2 months, just from when we had the engineered drawings to the actual energizing was less than 2 months, which was really pretty impressive compared to California. It is my least favorite place in the world right now. It's impossible to do anything there, and we're just beating our heads against the wall trying to get just a few small sites installed out there. So yeah, we're going on 9 months now without engineered drawings from the utility side. So I think avoiding that kind of a process is what we're looking for at all costs. In terms of the rate question, I know that comes up a lot. It's a little bit of a can of worms. Dealt with that a lot when I was on the Duke side. But I mentioned before, we're commercial operators, so we're looking to earn a payback on this equipment. The rate side of things is key to that equation. So when we look at multiple locations, if there's somewhere that has a more favorable rate, we're going to be installing there versus somewhere across the road that might have, it's a different utility and a higher demand charge. We are looking at that when we do our analysis for siting and construction. Then permitting, that's another thing that we look for as well. Trying to develop those relationships, and I know not all utilities are integrated with the local jurisdictions, but if that's something that you do, it's something that helps us deploy faster, and it's something that we look for as we have a large footprint. We're going to be looking for the areas where it's fastest to get to market and the least cost. Yep.
So, I've installed a few mega packs with Tesla, and they monitor from an e-stop standpoint of view, they monitor the gas, in the air and stuff like that. And that's how they see if there's a fire. And then installed an AC, and they had like some sort of fire suppression with, big fire extinguishers and all that kind of good stuff. And from a gas station standpoint of view, I mean, batteries are mobile, right? So you're bringing them on site. So how does that work? I mean, when you got 5 megawatts worth of batteries on site, and all of a sudden, I don't know. I mean, I'm not very well educated, but maybe you can comment on that.
So you mean in terms of when there's a lot of EVs on site?
Well, there's a possibility of fire, right? And
There's a thermal runaway event,
sure.
say, in one battery.
Yeah, there's some new guidance that has been in the body that's working on it, but there's fire code requirements that they're looking at with EV charging and gas stations particularly, and so there are some draft rules that were floated a couple of months ago. So there are a few standard bodies that are looking at that and developing an updated code for the U.S. in that area. Yeah.
Well, but your rate, you just took a published rate from Rock Hill, or did you guys work out a special time of use rate or any type of special?
Starting out just the standard general service rate. So it was, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it wasn't anything that we were too worried about. I think it's like a $5 per kW demand charge or something like that. So it's a test site, and that's part of the testing is to just see where we come out in terms of the real world utilization and what that means for cost. So we didn't, at this point, we weren't looking for anything, too custom in that regard. Yeah, Josh.
In terms of the expected life that you hope to get out of these DC fast chargers when at least in North America, as you're installing these, like both from a return on investment standpoint, but also just in terms of how many years you hope to get out of them, what do you think?
We're looking to get at least 10 years out of them. So that's kind of the baseline right now. Technology is changing really quickly, obviously, but we think that the power levels that we're installing with that higher power DC fast charging, and we're at 180 kW right now, We'll probably go a little bit higher next year, depending on what kind of hardware we see out in the market. But that's something that we see being, serving a need for quite a while in the future. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that's 50 kW that I don't think is going to be used in the next couple of years, after a lot of these cars come out that have higher powered charging. But we expect to get 10 years out of what we're putting out there right now.
And are you able to share just in terms of your return on investment? Are you going out 10 years or are you looking at like 3 to 5?
I can't share too much on that right now. But like I mentioned, we're being a commercial operator, we're looking at this in a similar way that we're looking at other investments.
So this part of the country, I mean, we get hurricanes. So when people have to evacuate, we're gonna need these chargers up and ready to charge. I don't know from your experience in Norway if they have similar storms or things like that, but how do you tackle, I guess, resiliency? And we saw, for example, yesterday an example with backup diesel generators, which kind of funny in a way, but how do you see tackling resilience?
So as far as the first question, do we get hurricane? We don't get hurricanes in Norway, or they don't get hurricanes in Norway. But the sort of peaking, the utilization is very peaky to begin with for EV charging, and that's one thing that we've seen is that on high traffic weekends, holidays, things like that, you get a lot of queuing. And so that's something that we try to, that's one reason why the sites are so big, is that you have to build to accommodate those peaks. It's sort of like utility systems in a way. Because if you don't build for those peaks, people are they're gonna know that they can't rely on your stations and they're gonna go somewhere else for their normal needs. So yeah, I think one way we're accommodating that is to build larger stations. In terms of the technical aspect of it, how we ensure reliability, that's something we deal with on the gas side of the business right now with hurricanes. We have to plan for that from a power standpoint, because gas station, you can't sell gas either when power's out. So I think part of it is in line with our core business traditionally, but there's a component that we need to plan for in the future, which is to just improve the reliability and resilience in the event of those kinds of.
When was the Rock Hill project done? The 2-month lead time kind of throws us off because transformers are 8 months to a year now. But was that a couple of years ago, or is that recent?
This was, we filed the permit applications in March, and it was energized on May 15th or so. So yeah, it was surprising to us too. And this is the site again, so you can see this is Cherry Road here in Rock Hill. This is the utility transformer. One thing that made this project really easy, the utility's been installing, there's a conduit here along the road. And as they build out their system, along with a lot of the new construction that's going on in Rock Hill, they've done a lot of expansion work and trying to anticipate the growth. So that was one thing that did make it a little bit easier. Just the fact that they have this conduit here that we could use and didn't require any kind of distribution upgrades. But I was surprised. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they had a 500 kVA line around.
Do y'all have a preferred charger from your work over in Norway right now that total investment you think is better?
Well, we do have the relationship with ABB, so we have done a lot of chargers with them in Europe. There's some suppliers there that we don't have here yet. We're looking for them to come to the US pretty soon, hopefully. This is Alpitronic. So a lot of our chargers in Europe are either ABB or Alpitronic or Tritium. Those are the 3 brands that we've installed the most in Europe. And then in the US, so this is the ABB charger here, and then we also have a power electronics charger that we're testing out. So that's the first charger that we've done with power electronics. And so far it's working pretty well. But yeah, I think everybody's really interested to see what's coming on the market as far as hardware goes, because it's still a pretty nascent market.
In Norway, I guess, where this question would be applicable, but have you seen the electric vehicle charging drive a change in strategy for your location of stores? Has it become a driver for more frequent stores, or?
It's a driver for It's been more of a driver for the in-store experience, I would say, than the actual locations, because we're not building a ton. Like I mentioned, it's kind of a small market in Norway, 5 million people, so we're not building a ton of new stores there. We did those two that I showed, they are new stores, so it's driven a little bit of the strategy there. So it's actually fewer stores and larger and a nicer in-store experience. So it's in the US, it's probably going to look a little bit different when we, like, this is a new store in Rock Hill, and the in-store experience is a lot different than we have in Europe, where we have more food. It's nicer food, to be honest. Nothing against our US operations, but the pastries are a little tastier. You want to sit down and spend a little bit more time. So that's what we're going to see in the US as well. I would expect is improvement in the in-store experience, fewer stores, larger stores, and really trying to capture more of the traffic than you see right now.
Usage rate been on those in Rock Hill? Because that's not somewhere I'd expect to be a tremendous number of electric vehicles.
Yeah, it's actually, it's been pretty good. So can't really see it in this picture, but 77 is right here. And so there's a huge interchange off of 77. So we capture a lot of traffic that goes south from Charlotte down to Columbia. That's a lot of the traffic to the beach and Charleston and those areas. People coming from up north and heading south. So it's been pretty decent. They're set to free vend right now. So when we put a charger out there, we give it away for free for a month or two. So if you are driving electric and you're coming through Charlotte, feel free to stop by, get some free electrons. But it's been pretty good. Yeah, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we've seen pretty decent utilization so far. Yeah.
I see that, and I know you talked a little about the ADA compliance. Are those spots currently, until there's like official ADA rules, are those spots just open to anyone at this point?
They are, yeah. Yeah. So they're sized for accessibility. So this one on the end, this is a van. This is, I think 13 feet. Then you have a 4-foot aisle. So it's just sized for accessibility. It's not signed as ADA only. Yeah. And the other, if we did another charger here, we would have another aisle. So anything more that we're basically following the California standard, which is 1 to 5, or 1 to 5 stalls is 1 van stall and 1 aisle. And then if you do for the additional stall, you would do another aisle after that, up to 25 stalls, I think. And then after that, it's 1 stall, 1 aisle per 25 stalls, something like that. Yep. So that's, oh yeah, okay, I'm at time. All right. I've got my email up here. If y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks a lot for having me.